Chapter 1951. Qi Qingxian didn't care about this kind of thing. But today he said something rare. In my opinion, for someone like your son, it's better to draw a line early. The secret guard in his hands had clearly said that ever since Zhang Fei had agreed to return home, he had only been excitedly asking about how his family was doing. He had not mentioned the Zhang father and daughter at all. Such a person was selfish to the extreme. Zhang Jianxing said in a low voice, "Thank you for your advice, Your Highness." Qi Qingxian nodded and turned to leave. Gu Xingyin stayed by her father's side the whole time. She could tell that her father really cared about Zhang Fei, which was why she felt uncomfortable at this moment. Zhang Jianxing came back to his senses and met his daughter's worried eyes. He smiled. "Don't worry too much. Your father's heart isn't that weak. Although I feel a little sad at most, I'm just disappointed in your brother." He was indeed disappointed because of Zhang Fei's coldness. But after thinking about it, Zhang Jianxing was glad that this happened. It allowed him to see Zhang Fei's true colors clearly. He would just take it that he had raised an idle person for the past 10 years. He was very glad that he didn't betroth his daughter to Zhang Fei. Otherwise, with Zhang Fei's character, he didn't know what kind of life Jiujia would have in the future. "Is this the capital?" Zhang Jianxing lifted the curtain and looked out of the carriage. He felt that there were people coming and going. As far as the eye could see, there was no place that wasn't bustling, no place that wasn't glorious. At this time, the silent man driving the carriage spoke. "Master Zhang, Mr. Zhang. Our master has returned to the manor first. How about I send you directly to the courtyard where you live?" This man was Qi Qingshuan's subordinate. The father and daughter had no objections. Then, the carriage stopped in a quiet alley. Zhang Jianxing was stunned as soon as he entered the courtyard. He thought that the prince had just casually prepared a residence for them. But now, it seemed that it was much better than casually. His eyes swept across the spacious courtyard, the carved doors and windows, and the elegant and exquisite furnishings in the room. He couldn't help but take a few deep breaths. "Little brother, there's really no need for us father and daughter to live in such a big courtyard." He tried to communicate with the man driving the carriage. The big man replied respectfully, "You are too polite. These are all the master's arrangements. You can rest assured and stay here." Zhang Jianxing stopped talking. He had taken advantage of others, not to mention such an exquisite courtyard. At this moment his heart was already in his throat. He couldn't help but think that if Jiujia couldn't cure that prince's illness, would he fly into a rage out of humiliation? However, Gu Xingyin's attitude was very natural. She asked, "Are you following us on your master's orders?" The big man said in a low voice, "Master said that while the two of you are in the capital, I will follow the two of you and wait for your orders." "That's it." Gu Xingyin looked at Zhang Jianxing, who was still worried. She sighed and said, "Dad, I remember. Why don't you go and see if there's anything broken on the way here? We'll move it directly to the shop later." Zhang Jianxing's attention was suddenly diverted. Hearing this, he quickly got up. "Yes, I have to go and see." This was something to settle down and settle down. He couldn't be careless. After watching Zhang Jianxing walk away, Gu Xingyin asked, "Did your master say when he will come?" Chapter 1952. As Qi Qingshuan's confidant, the man naturally knew that the young girl in front of him was the guest that His Highness ordered to take care of. When he faced Gu Xingyin, there was a layer of respect in his voice. "Miss, as subordinates, we don't know about Master's schedule." He continued, "Master said that he will come to you when the time comes." Gu Xingyin nodded. "All right then." The man continued, "You must be tired from the journey these days. Have a good rest today. Tomorrow I'll take you to see the shop." Gu Xingyin nodded. Then the man clapped his hands, and a few people came out of the yard. One of them was a pretty maid in her teens, and the other was a middle-aged woman with a smile on her face. "My name is Caiha," said the pretty maid. "My name is Ying Nyang," said the middle-aged woman. "These two have always been in this yard. In the future they will follow Miss Zhang. If Miss Zhang needs anything, just tell us." Gu Xingyin didn't expect them to be so considerate. She nodded and smiled at the two of them. The man continued, "My name is Qi Chao. I'll be responsible for Miss Zhang and Mr. Zhang's safety in the future." By the time they got familiar with everything, It was already yellow in the west. Ying Yang was the cook in this mansion. Her cooking skills were top-notch. After dinner, they went to bed early. The next day, Gu Xingyin sat in the carriage and came to the shop that Qi Qingxian had prepared. She looked at the beautifully decorated shop and the surrounding environment. She was very satisfied. Sure enough, Qi Qingxian did put in a lot of effort. However, Zhang Zhenxing was a little uneasy. He thought that it would be good enough if His Highness could find them a random shop. He didn't expect that it would be in such a good location, and the shop front was really spacious. He was a kind person. He always felt that Zhang family had taken a lot of benefits from His Highness without doing anything. Moreover, he was more worried that if his daughter couldn't cure His Highness's health, these things were really too much for him to accept. On the contrary, Gu Xingyin didn't think so much. She turned to look at Qi Chao. I'll have to trouble you to bring all the things we brought here. Qi Chao grinned and waved his hand. It's no trouble. He was good at martial arts. In less than 15 minutes, they had filled the entire room with all the things that Gu Xingyin and the others had brought over. Qi Chao took out a special token from his waist, and then gently hung it at a certain place at the gate. Zhang Genqing's puzzled him. He explained, this is our mansion's property. His Highness is taking care of this business, or in other words, His Highness of Scarovs. Lest some ignorant people come here trouble. Of Gu Shenggoff him understood that day. Zhang Zhenxing and Gu Xingyin stayed in the shop together. However, Gu Xingyin only stayed in the inner room. Zhang Zhenxing was the one who greeted the customers outside. After a day, when Zhang Zhenxing returned to the courtyard, his eyes were wandering. A pot of roses sold for 5 taels of silver. More than 10 pots were sold today. Other than roses, there were other flowers. Almost half of the flowers in the shop were sold today. Zhang Zhenxing calculated the profit. In just one day, he had earned a year's worth of silver. Chapter 1953. Even though he had mentally prepared himself, his eyes were still a little dazed after the calculation. It was indeed the capital. Gu Xingyin face-bombed. She said, Dad, this batch of flowers can be treated as a discount for the opening of the store. In the future, we will go down the path of cherishing flowers. This was what Gu Xingyin had thought about a long time ago. Since she had such a golden finger, it would be a waste to raise those ordinary flowers. In the future, she would focus on raising those precious species that were not easy to raise. If she raised those flowers well, a pot of them would be worth hundreds of pots of ordinary flowers. Most importantly, she would die of exhaustion if she kept ordinary flowers at such a consumption rate. Zhang Zhenxing also came to his senses. He agreed with his daughter's idea. Firstly, he felt sorry for his daughter's tiredness. Secondly, he had seen the generosity of the people in the capital. It was simply a huge market. Let's give the flower shop a name. He suddenly thought of this. Gu Xingyin smiled. I have already thought about it. Flower King Pavilion. This. Zhang Zhenxing was a little hesitant. Isn't it a little too arrogant? Gu Xingyin smiled. That's exactly what we want. We have the ability to do so. She had thought about it a long time ago. The shop mainly sold rare flowers. Her goal was to sell rare flowers in the entire Ming dynasty within a year. The first thing that came to everyone's mind was Flower King Pavilion. If it was an ordinary person, they would not dare to make such a promise. However, she had the spiritual spring in her hands. It was really difficult to raise any plants that could not be raised. Seeing his daughter like this, Zhang Zhenxing also felt a rare sense of pride in his heart. Okay, Flower King Pavilion it is. Dad believes in Jujio. After closing the shop and returning to the courtyard, Gu Xingyin realized that a guest had already arrived. What do you think of the shop? Qi Qingxian asked. Gu Xingyin nodded. Thank you, Your Highness King Ping. Qi Qingxian frowned. For the first time, he felt that the title he had been called for more than 20 years sounded so harsh. However, he did not say anything and just drank his tea quietly. Zhang Zhenxing could tell that he had something to say to his daughter. He found an excuse to return to his room. Miss Zhang, when can you treat me? Qi Qingxian asked. Gu Xingyin glanced at him and said, Wait for me here for a while. Soon, she came out with a cup of hot tea. Qi Qingxian took it over. There was a blooming rose on the surface of the tea. Flower tea? He was stunned. Gu Xingyin gestured for him to drink it. Qi Qingxian knew that he should be careful. But for some reason, he was certain that the woman in front of him wouldn't harm him. Therefore, in front of Gu Xingyin, he did not hesitate to drink the cup of hot tea one mouthful after another. Aren't you afraid that I'll poison you? Gu Xingyin teased. Qi Qingxian said seriously. I'm not afraid. Gu Xingyin was surprised. Qi Qingxian said, my heart tells me that you won't hurt me. Gu Xingyin glanced at him and did not say anything. Qi Qingxian only felt that as the cup of flower tea entered his stomach, there seemed to be a cool feeling starting from his stomach and slowly swimming to his limbs and bones. The irritable feeling in his body seemed to disappear without a trace under this cooling sensation. He closed his eyes comfortably. He took a long breath and asked curiously, what's the secret in this flower tea? Gu Xingyin glanced at him and replied, even if I tell you, you won't understand. Qi Qingxian. 6 chapters. I feel like my soul is out of my body when I'm writing tonight. I can't take it anymore. I'll update 6 chapters today and make up for it tomorrow. Today, my monthly votes have exceeded 1,000. Thank you for your votes. I have nothing to repay you with but my body. Cough. Please don't be careless and continue to hit me. Monthly votes. Good night. Chapter 1954. He couldn't help but cover his forehead with his hand and chuckled softly. Gu Xingyin glanced at him. Was this person someone who was amenable to force, but not persuasion? She didn't know that King Ping, Qi Qingxian, was not a good-tempered person in the Daming dynasty. She could tell from the Li family's cautious attitude towards him. She was the only person in the world who could treat him with such an attitude without risking the wrath of King Ping. Gu Xingyin said, from tomorrow onwards, take some time out to come to my place every day. I'll make you a cup of special flower tea. After a month, your body will be fine. Qi Qingxian was stunned. That's it. The chronic illness that had plagued his body for more than 20 years, and countless famous doctors had been helpless against it. But in her mouth, it was so easily and skillfully resolved? Gu Xingyin asked, what else do you want? Qi Qingxian choked. Well, this Miss Zhang did not look like an ordinary person. He looked at the sky outside and said, it's getting late. Have a good rest, Miss Zhang. Tomorrow I'll. He paused and looked at Gu Xingyin inquiringly. Gu Xingyin thought for a moment and said, I'll go to the shop with father these 3 days. You can come tomorrow at the same time. Qi Qingxian nodded. Gu Xingyin watched him leave. Soon, Zhang Jinxing entered the room. You and His Highness. Zhang Jinxing looked at his daughter and hesitated. Gu Xingyin looked at him. Zhang Jinxing found it hard to say, but as a father, he felt that he had to say some things. Father knows that you're a sensible person, that His Highness's appearance and grace are rare in my life. However, we're just an ordinary family. He didn't say much. Zhang Jinxing believed that with his daughter's intelligence, she would understand what he meant. Gu Xingyin couldn't help but chuckle. What are you thinking, father? I just made a cup of flower tea for the prince to drink. She lowered her voice and said, this involves some secrets. Father, it's best if you don't ask too much. Zhang Jinxing didn't know what was going on, but looking at his daughter's expression, he knew that it wasn't appropriate to say it. He could only nod his head. You have your own ideas, so I won't care too much about you. It's just that, Jiujio, Daddy doesn't ask for riches and honor in this life. I just want to see you live well, and find a husband who dotes on you in the future. I just want our family to live a peaceful and beautiful life. Gu Xingyin felt warmth in her heart. With her situation and her beauty, it was likely that many families would be eager for their daughters to take advantage of this opportunity to climb up the prince's good side. Only someone like Zhang Jinxing, who wholeheartedly cared about his daughter, would be worried that his daughter would be taken advantage of, right? King Ping's residence. This was the most illustrious mansion in the capital. It was located on one of the most famous and influential streets in the capital. The people who could live on this street were all the most powerful existences in the Great Ming Dynasty. Qi Qingxian was sitting in the waterside pavilion in the backyard of the mansion. There was a chessboard in front of him, and a man in a black robe sat opposite him. The man's face was resolute, and his expression was dignified. At first glance, one could tell that he was someone who had been in a high position for many years. Upon closer inspection, Qi Qingshuan's eyebrows and eyes resembled his. The man placed a black piece, and the game was set. Father, your chess skills are superb. I'm ashamed of my inferiority. Qi Qingxian smiled. Chapter 1955. Old King Ping glanced at his son and asked curiously, "What happened? Why are you so happy?" Qi Qingxian could not help but touch his face and asked in confusion, "Is it that obvious?" That was true. Old King Ping looked at the obvious joy on his son's face and said, "Nobody knows a son better than a father. Moreover, you never stopped smiling." Qi Qingxian smiled. "I've indeed encountered two happy things." Old King Ping's interest was piqued. "Oh." Qi Qingxian looked at him and said, "I'll keep the first one a secret. I'll tell you when the time comes. As for the second one," he dragged his words and said under Old King Ping's expectant gaze, "I met an interesting girl." An interesting girl? Old King Ping's eyes lit up. This was a big deal. He had a deep relationship with the princess consort. When the princess consort passed away, he refused to take in a concubine. He had been guarding Qi Qingxian alone for as many years as he was old. Qi Qingshuan's mother was the princess royal of the Great Ming Dynasty, the younger sister of the emperor. Theoretically, the emperor's son-in-law was forbidden from taking in a concubine. However, the princess royal had passed away for so many years, and King Ping was guarding her alone. The emperor in the palace found it hard to bear with this brother-in-law of his. He once planned to arrange a marriage for King Ping, but was firmly rejected by King Ping in the name of missing his beloved wife. Therefore, in this huge King Ping's mansion, the real masters were only Old King Ping and Qi Qingxian. This was one of the reasons why the imperial family had been so kind to King Ping's mansion all these years. Logically speaking, Qi Qingxian had the highest status among the princes with a different surname in the Great Ming Dynasty. He also held a part of the military power in his hands. He was one of the best candidates for marriage among the aristocratic families. Before Qi Qingxian turned 20 years old, many families had come to inquire about him. Even the emperor in the palace had said that he would choose a good marriage for his nephew. However, no one knew what was going on. Every time King Ping found someone he fancied, or the person in the palace loosened up a little and wanted to betroth the noble lady to King Ping's heir, that lady would definitely meet with an accident within 3 days. She would either catch a cold and be bedridden or suffer some minor injuries while riding a carriage. Furthermore, none of these things were man-made. They were all extremely coincidental. This kind of thing happened a few times, and Crown Prince Ping's reputation of bringing bad luck to his wife spread throughout the upper circle of the capital. Although no one dared to say it in front of him, who would dare to marry their daughter to him if they truly cared about her? There were those who coveted the power of King Ping's residence and were willing to give up a daughter to climb up this branch, but King Ping did not care about them. As a result, the original crown prince of King Ping became the new King Ping. He was already 22 years old, but his marriage was still unsettled. Old King Ping was a little anxious. Qi Qingxian, on the other hand, felt that his life was pretty good. He had never liked those delicate girls, and it was hard to imagine what it would be like to live with such a woman for the rest of his life. When he mentioned this to the old King Ping, the old King Ping was secretly worried that his son might have some kind of unspeakable disease. Or did he have a hobby of splitting peaches? For a long time, the old King Ping had been worrying about how to have an open and honest talk with his son without hurting his son's self-esteem. Chapter 1956. But now a huge surprise hit him. His son was actually interested in a girl. Old King Ping felt that even if the girl was a shrew, he could accept it without batting an eyelid. He hurriedly asked, "Girl? Which family is the girl from? What's her character like?" Gu Xingyin's fair and delicate face appeared in Qi Qingshuan's mind. He smiled and said, "Her family background is very ordinary. Father, you definitely don't know about it. She's very smart and her personality is also very interesting." It was fine if he did not say anything. Now that he only said half of it, old King Ping was even more curious. However, no matter how he asked, Qi Qingxian seemed to be doing it on purpose, and refused to say another word. As the father and son chatted, the topic turned to the poison in Qi Qingshuan's body. A few days ago, father sent someone to find a famous doctor from the western region. However, that doctor has a strange temperament. I'll personally invite him over in a few days. Speaking of this, old King Ping's face darkened. The poison in his son's body was the greatest pain, and also the greatest hatred in his life. Back then, he was still young and did things without any scruples. He thought that nothing in the world could hurt him. But what happened later? Those whom he had taught a lesson to, those whom he had offended, and those whom he had never taken seriously, had joined forces and dealt him a fatal blow. They poisoned his pregnant wife. It was a colorless and odorless poison that had no symptoms in the early stages. It was too late when they discovered it. His wife risked her life to give birth to their child. However, their only child was also infected with heat poison from the moment he was born. Even though Qi Qingxian was carefully taken care of and nursed by all the imperial physicians from the imperial hospital, since he was born, Qi Qingxian almost died. Later on, the news of Crown Prince Ping being poisoned was sealed off. Those imperial physicians were also ordered to keep their mouths shut. Only one imperial physician, who had been taking Qi Qingshuan's pulse for a long time, was kept in Crown Prince Ping's residence. Outsiders did not see anything unusual about King Ping. Only old King Ping knew what kind of disaster was buried in his son's body. He had seen with his own eyes countless times how much pain his son, who had always had extraordinary endurance, endured when the heat poison flared up on a summer night. Even his teeth were clenched so hard that they bled. Now that he was old, he no longer cared about power and wealth. His lifelong wish was to see the day his son was cured of the poison in his body. Hearing his words, Qi Qingxian said, "Father, don't be too anxious. I met a miraculous doctor when I went out this time. She promised to give me a try. Let's see the results first." Old Ping King's eyes lit up. Really? Was that godly doctor confident? Do you want me to pay him a visit personally? Old man. Qi Qingxian thought of Miss Zhang's face, and a smile flashed across his eyes. He coughed lightly and said, "There's no need, father. That godly doctor likes to be quiet, and has a low-profile personality. It's best if you don't disturb him." Old King Ping nodded in understanding. "You're right. Those experts always have some weird fetishes." Qi Qingxian held back his laughter and said seriously, "Yes, father. If my fever can really be cured this time, I'll introduce you to her again." Chapter 1957. Old King Ping felt that his son's smile was a little strange. However, he was in the stage where great hope was rising in his heart, so he did not pay too much attention to it. He only said, "If it can really cure the heat poison in your body, I must bring a generous gift and personally thank you." Qi Qingxian smiled but did not say anything. The next day, Gu Xingyin followed her father to the Flower King Pavilion as usual. She was only here to familiarize herself with the situation. Her father, Zhang Zhensheng, was still busy with the business of entertaining the guests. At noon, the plaque that Zhang Zhensheng had spent a lot of money on finally arrived. Looking at the three huge golden words Flower King Pavilion, even Zhang Zhensheng could not help but feel a sense of pride in his heart. He did not delay, and immediately asked someone to hang it up. Such a big movement naturally attracted the attention of the surrounding shops. Everyone first saw the three big words Flower King Pavilion, and then looked at Zhang Gensheng's unfamiliar face. They all wondered if this newly opened shop had a strong backer, or if he was just a country bumpkin who didn't know the depth of the capital. However, some people had already quietly retracted their gaze. The owner behind the plaque at the door was someone they could not afford to offend. During the day, Zhang Zhensheng was entertaining the guests outside, while Gu Xingyin sat in the inner room and listened to the conversations of the various guests. Of course, she wanted to know what kind of flowers these people in the capital liked. "I see that you call yourself the Flower King Pavilion, but you only sell ordinary flowers and plants. How can you be so arrogant?" A sharp female voice questioned. Zhang Zhensheng smiled apologetically and said, "Our shop has just opened. These ordinary potted plants are used as the vanguard. What if those precious flowers are damaged? What should we do?" Don't worry. In the future, our Flower King Pavilion will live up to this name. As he spoke, he reached out and pointed at the plaque. The madam's gaze followed the direction of his finger, and her expression suddenly changed. Then, she did not say anything else. She pointed at 2 potted plants and left. Obviously, she just noticed that the plaque that was hanging near the plaque was the token of King Ping's mansion. Zhang Jinsheng watched as the group of people walked away, and breathed a sigh of relief. At this moment, he finally understood what it meant to lean against a big tree and enjoy its shade. If it wasn't for King Ping's help, even if he had enough money to buy a shop in the capital city, he would have been suppressed to the point that he wouldn't be able to stand up. After sending the guests away, Gu Xingyin stood up. "Father, I have an idea," she slowly explained her idea. Zhang Jinsheng's eyes widened. There was both worry and a hint of excitement in his eyes. "You can really do it." Gu Xingyin was confident. "Of course, as long as daughter has 2 months. Daughter dares to guarantee that our Flower King Pavilion will definitely shock everyone." Zhang Jinsheng pondered for a while, then gritted his teeth and said, "All right, Father will give away all the remaining flowers and plants in the shop for free tomorrow, and then spread the news that the Flower King Pavilion will officially open for business in 2 months." Gu Xingyin nodded. "Thank you, Father." When they returned home at night, Qi Qingxian was already waiting for them. As usual, Gu Xingyin made him a cup of flower tea with spiritual spring water and watched him finish it. Chapter 1958. What's the matter? Qi Qingxian asked. Based on his understanding of Gu Xingyin these days, she wouldn't stare at him for so long if there was nothing important. Thinking of this, Qi Qingxian couldn't help but reach out and touch his face. He was quite confident in his appearance and charm. He also knew that he was undoubtedly the type that young girls liked. But he didn't know why this trick didn't seem to work in front of Miss Zhang. "Yes." Gu Xingyin nodded gracefully. "Can you help me find some flower seeds?" Qi Qingxian was puzzled. "Flower seeds? What kind of flower seeds do you want?" He knew that Miss Zhang had the skill of raising flowers. An ordinary potted plant could completely show the appearance of a treasure after being raised by her. From Qi Qingshuan's point of view, those precious flowers in the imperial garden really couldn't compare to Miss Zhang's pink rose. Gu Xingyin said without thinking, "It doesn't matter what species it is. In short, the more precious it is, the harder it is to raise, the better it is." Qi Qingxian. It was really the first time he heard such a request. But this didn't seem to be a difficult thing for him. He nodded. "This is no problem. I'll go home tonight and ask the gardener in the mansion. If it's not enough, I'll go to the palace and ask for some for you." Qi Qingxian was quite efficient. The next day, when Gu Xingyin returned home, she saw Qi Qingxian sitting in the hall, and a man in green standing straight behind him. The man in green was carrying a big bag. Seeing Gu Xingyin come back, Qi Qingxian hurriedly said, "These are the flower seeds I collected. See if there's anything missing. I'll go and find more for you." Gu Xingyin walked over and took a look. She found that in the bag in the hands of the man in green were bags of seeds. The names of the flowers were written on the outside. Taking a closer look, there were at least dozens of flowers in the bag. After a rough glance, there were Yao Huang Wei, purple blue Tianyu, snow reflecting the morning glow, Emolan, Hanlan, etc. She nodded. "Thank you, Your Highness." Qi Qingxian waved his hand and asked curiously, "You want to grow flowers?" Gu Xingyin replied, "Of course, if we don't grow flowers, what will my Flower King Pavilion sell?" Qi Qingxian asked curiously, "I heard that you've given away all the flowers in the Flower King Pavilion today, and will only reopen in 2 months?" He pointed at the seeds in front of him. "You're not thinking of growing these in 2 months, are you? That was simply impossible, all right? In terms of time, there was no time at all. Needless to say, most of the flowers here shouldn't be blooming at this season." Gu Xingyin glanced at him and said, "I naturally have my own way." Qi Qingxian did not feel offended at all. Instead, countless curious thoughts arose in his mind. He really wanted to see if this Miss Zhang would really be able to make 100 flowers bloom in the Flower King Pavilion 2 months later. Gu Xingyin made him a cup of tea as usual. "Before you drank my tea, Your Highness, have you ever thought that the heat poison in your body could be cured by a cup of tea a day?" Qi Chengxian was speechless for a moment. After a while, he could only squeeze out a sentence. The world is so big. I don't think I'm narrow-minded, but I'm still inexperienced. Gu Xingyin laughed and said, I don't have to go out from tomorrow onwards. Your Highness, you don't have to come so late every afternoon. After saying this, she didn't get a response. When she looked up, she saw Qi Chengxian sitting on the chair and staring at her blankly. Chapter 1973. Ever since Chen Mingzhu heard the words of the Marquis of Mingyi's wife, she began to pay attention to the big and small flower shops in the capital. She also asked people to inquire about the famous gardeners. But unfortunately, the result was that there was no way to plant peonies in this season. Today she was in the mansion. When she heard that the Flower King Pavilion suddenly opened, she had a thought and asked people to prepare a carriage to come here. Many people around recognized her, and some of them even frowned and took a few steps back without leaving a trace. The domineering reputation of the eldest daughter of the Marquis of Mingyi's mansion had spread throughout the capital. However, when Chen Mingzhu saw this scene, she did not feel angry. Instead, she felt proud. In her eyes, these people were afraid of the reputation of the Marquis of Mingyi's mansion. She saw that everyone was standing outside and did not go in. She frowned and walked straight to the Flower King Pavilion with her maids. Of course, she was stopped by someone. Zhang Jinxing walked out personally and apologized with a smile. I'm sorry, Mississippi. The shop is not cleaned up yet. The floor is dirty, and I'm afraid it will dirty your eyes. Please come in after it's cleaned up. These words were not too much. If it was an ordinary person, they would probably follow this excuse. But Chen Mingzhu did not. She raised her eyebrows and said, This is the first time I've heard that a business owner would leave their customers outside. Do you have any rare treasures in your shop that you have to hide them like this? She said coldly. I really want to be the first person to enter the shop. As she spoke, she wanted to force her way in. Zhang Genxing's expression changed. He thought that there were all kinds of people in the capital. This young lady seemed to be of noble status, and her appearance was not bad. Who would have thought that she would be so unreasonable? Fortunately, Qi Chengxian had prepared a lot of people in advance to gain the favor of his future father-in-law. They came in handy. Looking at the row of people in gray with cold temperament, Chen Mingzhu was shocked. She did not expect that this little flower shop owner would dare to stop her. The little girl in green beside her scolded. How dare you? Do you know who our young lady is? Hurry up and back down. Zhang Jinxing also put away the smile on his face and said indifferently, I don't know who this young lady is, and I have no intention of offending any guests today. However, there is a rule. Miss, please don't make things difficult for us. He had a lean appearance to begin with. Today, he had specially put on a light muslin robe with a brocade belt around his waist. With such a stern face, he seemed to have a bit of an air about him. It was hard to tell what he was thinking. Actually, Zhang Genxing was a little nervous. Chapter 1977. Inexplicably, Zhang Jinxing felt tears welling up in his eyes. For all parents in the world, having a promising daughter was the greatest consolation. He smiled and said, Yes, it will get better and better in the future. Daddy's Jojo is really amazing. The newly opened Flower King Pavilion in the capital had become the topic of conversation in the streets and alleys overnight. The nobles were excitedly talking about the rare flowers in the Flower King Pavilion and estimated how much money they would need to buy the flowers they liked. As for the ordinary people, they were excitedly talking about how those big shots used money they would never dare to think of to buy a pot of beautiful flowers. Do you know the Hanting orchid? It's the best among orchids. Yesterday, a duke spent more than 3,000 taels of silver to buy this pot of flowers. TSK, more than 3,000 taels of silver. A fruit vendor bragged to the people beside him. Looking at his proud expression, Those who didn't know would think that the flowers belonged to him. King Ping's residence. Old King Ping naturally knew what was happening outside. He was chatting with his son. Miss Zhang is really a capable person. I only thought that she was good at medicine. I didn't expect that her skills in growing flowers. Thinking about the sky-high prices of the plants in the Flower King Pavilion, King Ping started to worry. According to the horrifying selling speed of the Flower King Pavilion, this daughter-in-law's wealth was limitless in the future. Qi Qingxian was full of pride. Of course, how can the girl I like be a commoner? King Ping glanced at him. I'm going to the palace today to talk about the two of you. Qi Qingshuan's eyes lit up. Thank you, father. King Ping left immediately and arrived at the palace in the afternoon. You want to ask for a marriage for Qingxian? The emperor was surprised. His nephew was quite old. He had paid attention to this matter in private. However, King Ping's residence didn't seem to be in a hurry. The emperor also had his own thoughts, so he had put it aside. Now that King Ping took the initiative to mention it, the emperor was curious. King Ping looked angry. He sighed and said, "To be honest, Your Majesty, I'm not very satisfied with that girl." The emperor became even more curious. What do you mean? Old Ping Wang started to talk even more gloomily. From Gu Xingyin's appearance to her family background to her occupation. To sum it up, he was too good-looking, and one could tell that he was restless. The status of a merchant's family was slightly lower. Now that she had opened a flower shop to sell flowers, it would be embarrassing if word got out. However, when the emperor heard this, his heart suddenly relaxed. He trusted King Ping's residence, but that did not mean that he wanted his subjects to be too powerful. Chapter 1980. Chen Mingzhu was sitting in the room of the Marquis of Mingyi. Mother, I got the news that the Flower King Pavilion is going to sell the Kunshan Luminous Glow tomorrow. Chen Mingzhu said. The Kunshan Luminous Glow was a treasure among the white peonies. It had been many years since a pure Kunshan Luminous Glow appeared in the Great Ming Dynasty. Everyone saw that the Flower King Pavilion was going to sell this one. The flower shape was perfect, and the pinkish-white color looked like a pile of snow from afar. From its appearance, it was definitely of the highest quality. The Marquis of Mingyi said faintly, "The Kunshan Luminous Glow is rare. I think there will be many people competing with us tomorrow." She frowned when she said this. With her understanding of the Marquis of Mingyi and the old consort of King An's residence, she knew that the Flower King Pavilion had a Kunshan Luminous Glow, and King An's residence would definitely think of a way to get it. In terms of strength, how many families in the capital could match up to King An's residence? However, would they waste such a good opportunity to establish a good relationship with King An's residence? She looked at her daughter and said, "Go to the Flower King Pavilion today and see that County Princess Xifang to inquire about the news." She actually felt that the better way was for her daughter to establish a good relationship with Gu Xingyin. It would be best if that County Princess Xifang could specially cultivate a peony for her daughter. However, at this time, the Marquis of Mingyi still did not know that her daughter had made a fool of herself at the Flower King Pavilion. These days, King Ping's residence was busy preparing for the wedding, and had forgotten to find trouble with the Mingyi Marquis residence. Chen Mingzhu naturally did not dare to tell her mother about this matter. If the Marquis of Mingyi knew, she would probably be furious. Hearing her mother's words, Chen Mingzhu's face showed a trace of embarrassment. She had fallen out with the Flower King Pavilion in front of everyone. How could she put down her face and go there now? She would rather not enter that place for the rest of her life. However, meeting her mother's gaze, Chen Mingzhu did not dare to say anything. After saying yes, she obediently got into the carriage. When Gu Xingyin received the news that the eldest miss of the Marquis residence came to see her, she was surprised. With Chen Mingzhu's personality, she was willing to put down her face and come to the Flower King Pavilion. She thought about it for a while, then asked someone to bring Chen Mingzhu to the guest room on the other side. She wanted to see what Chen Mingzhu wanted to do. Chen Mingzhu casually sized up her surroundings. After looking around a few times, the corner of her mouth twitched slightly, revealing a hint of disdain. In her opinion, the Flower King Pavilion's hospitality was a little too simple.